I'm Daniel Levine, and this is the Bio Report. Asia is quickly becoming a powerhouse for biopharma innovation, changing ideas about where breakthrough science and fast, cost-efficient drug development happen. A new McKinsey Company report shows how countries like China, Japan, and India are each building their own strengths across the drug development continuum. We spoke to Fangning Zhang, a partner in McKinsey's Shanghai office, about what's driving this shift, how it could make innovation more affordable, and why treating Asia as optional may mean missing the next wave of global R&D. Fangning, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We're going to talk about Asia as an emerging source of biopharmaceutical innovation. A new report from McKinsey Company that analyzes that transformation and what this will mean for biopharmaceutical companies, investors, and policymakers. Let's start with the big picture. As Asia has evolved from a follower to a real driver of pharmaceutical innovation, it feels like it's happened very fast. How big a shift is this, and what stands out as you look at the momentum we're seeing?
So first of all, maybe let me paint a little bit of the picture, so that then we can discuss kind of what's driving that. So for Asia, over the past 5 years, Asia's contribution to global innovative drug pipeline has grown from 28% to 43%. So that's number one. And number two is if you look at the global growth in innovative drug pipelines, Asia has contributed 85% in 2024. On top of that, you start to see that there are significant amount of patents. 2/3 actually of global patent are generated from Asia, and Asia certainly increasingly is contributing to cross-border out-licensing deals between Asia innovators and the global players. So I think that's really a little bit of the kind of where Asia innovation stands today. What that means is both in terms of the scale of the innovation that's happening, as well as the pace of that progression, I think both are worth being noted by any ecosystem players, whether you're a pharma company, biotech company, or investor.
What accounts for this? Is it being driven by policy, talent, capital, or science? What's made this transformation possible?
The way in our research, we're actually taking two lenses. One is we're looking at the value chain capabilities that has been built across the key markets in the region. So that means looking at discovery, development, manufacturing, commercialization, and how what are the kind of the scale and relative the distinctiveness of these capabilities in the region. And the second lens we have taken is actually looking at the underlying enablers of building that ecosystem. Here we actually look at, it's not, as to your point, it's not one element that really makes a difference. It's a combination of several forces working in a coherent manner that includes the government support, includes regulatory framework, the capital, talent, as well as the other tech and digital enablement. So all these elements will actually need to be working hand in hand to enable the scaling of innovation ecosystem in each of the markets. Maybe I take one example, right? If we look at Japan as one example, we often hear that in terms of capabilities, Japan is very strong in basic science as well as in late-stage clinical development. The country has produced many Nobel Prize winners in the biomedical space over the past decades. And also, if you look at the FDA approvals over the past 5-10 years, there are multiple 20 plus approvals are contributed by Japan. Right? At the same time, we also see that for Japan, the translation, there are gaps in translational research that's really not yet been the strong suit. When it comes to the enablers, the second lens we're taking, we actually feel that Japan has really need to step up on capital funding, especially for entrepreneurs. They also could actually do more in cultivating and encouraging the entrepreneurship from a talent perspective. In Japan specifically, over the past, I would say, couple of years, we start to see some very interesting, important progress around that. Right? For example, the Japan Agency of Medical Research and Development actually has set up a fund specifically to match the venture capital funding to enable early startup to progress their pipeline. They have this 2-to-1 matching mechanism. Once you are qualified, you actually get $2 for each of a dollar that VC invests, non-dilutive, so that you can really making sure that the early stage startups have sufficient funding to back up and to progress their important assets. So maybe I pause here. That hopefully gives you a flavor of how we're looking at the underlying enablers that really kind of driving the momentum we're seeing today.
You spoke about Japan here, but I think it points to a bigger point about the report, which is that there's a tendency in the United States to think of Asia as a monolith, but it's really a collection of very different countries with very different capabilities. Given the differences between these companies, how should global biotech or global biopharma or US companies design strategies that fit each market, but also tap into regional synergies?
Let me unpack that question into a few elements, if I may, because if you are big pharma, and the implication might be look very different compared to if you are a biotech. So I think first of all, no matter who you are and where you're from, I would encourage folks to really spend some time to at least to understand what's the lay of the land and what are the landscape that's happening from Asia. That's part of the intention of our report. And certainly some people know pockets of the market or in the region. But I think if you really wanted to capture the opportunity, some level of learning and immersion will be helpful. But beyond that, specifically, if you are I take if you are a regional player, right? We have examples that, for example, a Indian pharma company actually would say, okay, there are many assets, innovative assets coming from China. Can I actually take a portfolio approach, partner with some of the leading players, and taking these assets to emerging markets, right, beyond India for sure, that you could go to Southeast Asia, Middle East, Africa, etc., Latin American, so that you can become actually leveraging the regional opportunities, right? And then for some multinational companies, we have seen, without naming the names, that they actually have built external innovation scouting team in the region. Of course, looking at China closely, but also building your scouting capabilities and teams on the ground in South Korea, in Japan, in Singapore, etc. With the intention is to make sure that there are sufficient visibility they keep in the region. And then beyond that, right, there are also other opportunities. For example, on clinical research, we historically we see that there are very strong clinical capabilities, also in Japan, in South Korea, as well as emergingly from China. Right. So how these researchers actually how they can collaborate to really accelerate some of the medical researchers in the early stage, so that they can really generate data beyond in a broader set of populations, and then hopefully that will advance the early clinical research faster and in a more effective way. So there are almost many a range of opportunities that really play into this. I think for each of the company, and the implication will be different. You need to really kind of revisit and assess what might be the most important and relevant capabilities that you want to tap into in the region. And as a result of that, how you wanted to build your local presence capabilities together. And I think in terms of the leveraging the capabilities in the region, right? It's not a one size fits all. It's also not like you need to leverage all the capabilities across all markets in one go. But being mindful of the interconnectivity and be really intentional about it, I think that's probably the right mindset to have.
You highlight that Asia can lead in affordable innovation, not just premium science. How might that reshape global access and pricing conversations?
The way I look at it is today, if you look at many patients in emerging markets, probably there will be a significant portion of the population they don't yet have the same access as the patients in the developed markets would have in advanced therapies. Now, with the innovators coming from Asia, of course, so far is working on the established targets. If they can produce this in a more efficient way, that does potentially offer a alternative way to look at how you may want to approach this segment of patients that are still in dire needs of accessing the latest therapies. And then that might be actually provide alternative. But that being said, it's not a straightforward path. Often you have to really think through the not only the upstream R&D but also manufacturing footprint as well as the commercialization. What's the most effective way to really bring these therapies to quite fragmented? Today, many are still subscaled markets. So I'm not saying that's already a done deal. It's hard to say that's going to be a easy kind of turnkey solution. But certainly, what we see is in Asia, in the broader other regions, we start to see that companies are asking the question. Right, you already see some of the early example of these cross region deals or licensing deals that happened. I think that people are very eager and willing to take the courage or make the experiment to see how they might be tackle the question with the emerging opportunities at hand.
China now represents almost a third of the global innovation pipeline, with research and clinical work happening far faster than in the West. What do people misunderstand about China's innovation model, and how sustainable is that speed?
Yes, I think maybe I wouldn't say misunderstand. I probably would say it's um, a understanding, deepening understanding over time. What I really give credit to many of the folks coming from the West, especially over the past couple of years, there are a lot of people really going to China, spending days and sometimes weeks, talking to people across the ecosystem, talking to the biotech executives, the investors, the PIs, the CRO leaders, etc. They're really trying to understand the fabric that has enabled the kind of the situation that we have seen in China. So I would say that beyond that, often probably is just to number one is to spend time to really learn and get deeply immersed. That's very important. Number two is keep in mind that China will remain a very dynamic place. One quote that really kind of left a mark on myself is when I talked to one of the China biotech executive. He said, "Well, 10 years ago, in one of the China community conferences, we actually tried to predict where China innovation would stand by 2025. And now looking back, although we're working at the front line of that, every single one of us have underestimated the progress that has been made if we look at today." So I think that just keep that in mind. Is probably is not a simple extrapolation of what has happened in the past will represent the future. Certainly not. But I think the kind of dynamic nature in China is something that's hard to predict. There's always ups and downs and ambiguities and uncertainties for sure. But you need to really making sure that you're staying close to the ecosystem, to the situation, potentially building some local presence and capabilities, so that you're really seeing the kind of the what's happening and anticipating more closely from China. So that's probably something I think I would emphasize, especially for folks who today have not have very limited or no presence in China. I think it's understanding and then decide whether what is the right level of presence that you need to build locally, and then go from there.
The report actually focuses on 5 countries, not just China and Japan, but also India, Singapore, and Korea. Can you give a sense of some of the different strengths of each of these countries? What stands out about each?
Maybe I quickly go through China. Japan I touched on earlier, and then we can cover Korea, Singapore, and India quickly. On China, so I think there are three keywords probably worth to highlight. Number one is scale. Number two is the speed. Number three is the efficiency. So on the scale side, right, we have talked about the sheer growth on the innovative pipeline over the past several years. Certainly have been a very rapid progression. But beyond that, if you look at the breadth of the therapeutic areas that China Innovative Pipeline is covering, as well as the modalities that coming from China Pipeline, I think it's also quite broad. On the therapeutic area side, China actually has started from oncology. Today, if you look at oncology, is still a major component of that innovative play. But increasingly, we see the diversification that goes into immunology, goes into cardiovascular, metabolic, as well as emergingly in neuroscience. So I think that's very exciting that it's not only an oncology play, and people should actually also be paying attention to other therapeutic areas. Modality wise, China actually, when we look at phase one and phase two innovative pipeline from China, it actually accounts for roughly 1/3 of global new modality, next gen modality. So that's the ADCs, bispecifics, etc. Those elements. I think that's also an important strength because a lot of China innovation was built or started from this engineering-based iteration. That's where the speed and efficiency also comes to play. But I think those new modalities is worth noting. You have seen a lot of licensing deals over the past couple of years in ADC, for example, in bispecifics. I would anticipate in the coming years, you will see other modalities probably will growingly getting represented from China. And South Korea. South Korea, I think there are three things to really highlight. One is actually the advanced manufacturing capacity and capability. The second is the play in cell therapy. And the third is some modality play in such as ADC and bispecifics. So Korean certainly a different scale, but the government has also been very intentional in building or enabling the biotech sector, right? Starting from the national strategy to setting up the Korean Drug Development Fund, which committed to invest a couple $1 billion in the next between 2021 to 2030. So through that, you also see some kind of companies already being able to make progress. There are products coming from Korean companies being approved in the U.S. There are also multiple out licensing deals in ADC, bispecific cell therapy that has really as a evidence that some of the leading South Korean biotech companies are really making progress around that. When it comes to Singapore, I think the key words is translational research, regional hub, and attracting international funding. So for Singapore, the government has also set up multiple vehicles to really as a beachhead in attracting investors, biotechs, and multinational companies to Singapore, right, as a regional hub. There are a couple multinational companies actually have set up incubators, for example, in Singapore, really trying to bridge that research and translation area. We also have seen that there are multiple notable funds, international funds are setting up presence in the region, such as Flagship, CBC, etc. They are trying to really say we were based in Singapore, really trying to tap into the broader innovation from the region. I would say Singapore will continue to play a role as going forward in really being an important hub on those fronts. And last but not least is India. I think India is very interesting because often people don't yet see India as an innovation player. Often that's the first question I get from people say, "Oh, well, I didn't know that, I didn't realize India is actually doing innovation. It has been a generics play so far," which is true. India has been quite successful in building up a generics business. However, at this point, the way we see is India actually has a clear conviction from the top to the leading players, to the startups, actually to pivot towards innovation. What we start to see is the commitment to really setting up in industry parks. We also see that because of the talent base from India, there are multiple multinational companies are setting up global capability centers in India, with the intention really is to leverage their talent pool to accelerate, enable global clinical development, for example, but also beyond, could be data centers, etc. So yes, I mean on India, I think if you relatively speaking, they're still kind of early in the journey, but it's something is also worth to note is they're not sitting around, right? There are leading generics players, there are investors, etc. are working very hard to really also drive the innovation momentum from India.
Your report outlines four main global models: licensing, partnerships, direct to global launches, and new co spinouts. How do you see this mix evolving in the next few years?
I would say over the past, I would say decade, right? If we look across the Asia innovators, how they have been able to leverage different paths to realize the global value of their innovative assets, I would say all these models have played a role. Going forward, my short answer is actually I think all these models probably will still have the sustained momentum. If I quickly go through, right, our licensing is certainly still a bread and butter in cross-border transactions. For many multinational companies, even this week, we already see multiple deals coming from Chinese companies to multinational. Right, I think that momentum certainly will anticipate to continue. The strategic partnership, certainly many multiple innovators from Japan historically have really successfully leveraged that strategic partnership to help them to build capabilities outside of a home market. And going forward, we probably will see that beyond the innovators coming from Japan, we start to see the players from China, for example, are also very keen to form co-development and co-commercialization partnership. With the intention certainly is to learn from the established players, and then hopefully over time build some of their own capabilities and presence. New co-model has been, it's not, I really say it's not new, but I think it has been kind of further really more utilized over the past couple of years by innovators from the region. I think that will continue to be a complementary way, given depending on the nature of the asset, depending on the interest of the company, that will continue to have a place in really enabling the Asia companies to realize their global value. The self build, I think people are more selective It's not a one size fits all. Certainly, it's not for everyone's appetite. But the anticipation, I would say, there probably will be some companies with their own aspiration, and if they have the right financial muscles, they would be willing probably to at least put some effort towards that.
Innovative science gets a lot of the attention, but what are you seeing in terms of innovative deal models?
Yes, we start to see some of that. I mean, the royalty-based agreements, for example, right, and also kind of more interesting no nucle formation. Even over the past year, we already see that some of the U.S. biotechs raise funds based on the assets, actually anchor assets coming sourced from Asia. So probably not kind of groundbreaking, brand new models, but I think it's more of a different variety of flavors, right? On top of that, we also see that in the region, probably in China and beyond, there are companies they actually wanted to create this kind of a holdco model where it's not only you're self-generating one or two assets, but you're really leveraging the discovery and early development efficiency, then you can accelerate multiple assets that can be sourced from China, can be sourced worldwide. So I think that these are kind of different variety of models. Hopefully, will continue to benefit the startups and the investors, right, to be able to accelerate the pipeline.
There has been growing M&A transactions with Asian biopharma targets. Are we entering a period of more full acquisitions, or do you expect partnerships to still dominate?
I would say it's the coexist probably is my take. The M&A certainly it has its place. So far, based on the track record in the region, I would say the strategic partnerships, the licensing will remain to also to be quite playing an important role. I don't see these as one versus the other. Probably it's more about for each of the right opportunities and matching with the right deal deal terms and deal structure.
For global R&D leaders stretching limited resources, what practical moves should they consider in Asia over the next 2 or 3 years?
I would say understand, strategize, and then act fast. What I mean by that is really assess the opportunities in the region that we have highlighted today, but more importantly, then decide which are the right opportunities for your company to go after. For example, do you want to build more early development capabilities in the region to accelerate your program? Do you want to strike more discovery partnership with the innovators in the region to accelerate your pipeline in the upstream? Or do you want to actually explore other partnerships beyond licensing transactions so that you actually try to make a value proposition that's attractive on both sides? So the possibilities, I think, are abundant. But what I want to highlight is this need to act fast because the competition is also not sitting around, right? For high quality assets, high quality companies, I would imagine that many peers will be going after. So for these companies, for multinational companies, I think it's important to really have the conviction and be having the willingness to move fast to capture the opportunity.
You describe an ideal configuration: Japan's science based, China's clinical scale, Korea's biologics know how, Singapore's innovation ecosystem, and India's manufacturing strength. How could a company realistically build toward that?
Yeah, the short answer is that's just an illustration of how you think about the interconnectivity. Maybe the essence of that is really understand where the pockets of excellence in the R&D capability value chain sits, and then really ask the question, does that make sense for my company to tap into some of that? I don't anticipate any biotech will have these kind of 5 markets all spread out, plus US and Europe, that's probably too complex, creating a operational complexity. But I think it's important to really ask the question strategically and intentionally, where is the best place for me to build my research team? What should be my clinical development strategy that really ensure the speed, optimize the cost, but also help me to increase the confidence of the pivotal trials. And then manufacturing similarly, what is my manufacturing strategy that allows me to maximize efficiency, but also be able to navigate the future market needs and regulatory needs. So I think, in short, is more about being open-minded, being intentional. I think what we're trying to advocate is, or to think through is, it's not you build a biotech from a country and then you stay there. There are probably possibilities to really think about these as puzzles, and then you need to put together the your solution that will be work the best for your company.
Large pharma companies are used to managing by region. What organizational changes are needed to manage R&D by capability instead?
I think that will really take conviction, that takes the focused intention, and it will take time. Why? Because I agree with you. I think the for big pharma companies, the R&D organization has its own kind of ways of working that has been well established, that has been working for many years. So it's not, we're not saying that okay that you have to change that, but I think the question is, how can you adapt with the new opportunity emerging? So that really requires the company to think through what is the local capabilities I need to build, and then as a result of that, how do I adapt my operating model? Meaning that how do I redefine the roles and responsibilities, the collaboration across different pockets or parts of these capabilities globally, and without slowing down the progress. So it's not an easy answer. I think it will take time and take conviction and really take focus for companies to figure that out. But I would say for the companies who have invested energy, really have the conviction to go after that, then over time with the experience and learning, I would anticipate that they will be able to see the right outcome.
And beyond deal counts or valuations, what are the most important on the ground indicators investors should watch?
Yes, I would say those are probably the kind of most visible markers. The way we're looking at is also beyond that, looking at the upstream, meaning that okay, on the research side, in terms of doing the basic medical research, are there more research coming from the region? And then on the clinical research side, we actually some of the markers we see actually is how Asian companies are represented in the major international conferences such as ASCO, AACR, etc. By increasing, you will see more clinical research representations probably from that. And then on top of that, I think it's looking at probably funding is another element, as well as the performance and dynamics of the capital market. Those probably are the different elements that give you a sense collectively around how the momentum in different parts of the markets of Asia is progressing.
With discovery cost in Asia roughly half of global averages, how should that shape expectations around valuations and returns?
I think it boils down to um, what is the value that from these assets eventually that could generate for patients? What's the patient impact that these drugs could generate? So that's why I cannot comment on specific kind of deal terms. But if you look at different stage, and these multinational companies or licensors are very sophisticated, right? So they would actually really evaluate the intrinsics of the asset they're looking at, the commercial potential, the risk profile, as well as the competitive intensity. So I think it's hard to comment one way or the other. But overall, I would say at least what I'm seeing is actually the companies are really has been really expanding and beefing up their on the ground scouting, search, and evaluation teams. They are becoming increasingly more educated and more sophisticated in tapping into the innovation, in engaging with the innovators from the region. As a result of that, I would say over time you probably will see the value, right? The value and ROI equation will continue to be optimized.
What domestic or regional policies can help ensure that Asia's cost advantages translate into broader access to medicines both within the region and globally?
I think that will take a lot. On one side, on the regulatory side, I have been hearing at least the desire and potentially some efforts say, is there a way to really think about accelerated regulatory approval across different markets? That's the first one. The second one, I think, will be the commercialization approach. Today, if you look at in emerging markets, um, the cost of doing business in the innovative market is quite high. To the extent that I would say that you cannot just take what has worked in other markets and hopefully that will work because you're reaching to a very different healthcare systems. The pricing affordability will be very different, and the way you educate your sales reps and the way you conduct your business will be very different. I think that equation probably will still require a lot of work and a lot of experimentation to figure out a way that's economically viable to bring innovative drugs to more patients in the broader markets. But I think eventually, at least many of the executives I talk to, they're still highly committed around bringing more medicines, more innovative medicines to more patients faster. So I think it really requires um, many leaders in the industry to continue to work together to collaborate. Also requires the regulators, policymakers, and have the willingness and courage to go after that as well.
For executives or investors who still view Asia as maybe a nice to have, are they missing something? Should they be feeling urgency that they're not feeling?
I would say actually I becoming increasingly optimistic about the people's appetite, curiosity to understand what possibilities Asia could offer, and then make a decision around how you wanted to engage. Throughout the conversations I've had, including many conversations we're having this week at JP Morgan, I think people are very curious to learn. There's a level of humbleness which I have been very impressed with. Is really learn as much as they can. They wanted to visit the markets in the region, and certainly well, I hope the after kind of curiosity after learning there will be important decisions that can be made. What I'm hoping is or what I wanted to emphasize is I would say at least before you say no, make sure that's an educated no, that's an informed no, or yes. So make sure that you are informed, you are educated. It's okay eventually if you say, okay, not for me, not now, but the decision should be made after you sufficiently study the opportunities and possibilities.
The report is The Emerging Epicenter, Asia's Role in Biopharma's Future. You can find it on the McKinsey.com website under Life Sciences and Our Insights.
Fangning Zhang, partner in the Shanghai office of McKinsey Company. Fangning, thanks for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. The Bio Report is a production of the Levine Media Group. To automatically download this podcast each week, subscribe to our RSS feed or through iTunes or other podcast manager. To join our mailing list, go to levinemediagroup.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to drop us a line or are interested in sponsoring this podcast, send email to danny@levinemediagroup.com. Special thanks to Jonah Levine, who composed our theme music, and the Jonah Levine Collective, which performs it.